Today I've been asked, like the others on the stage, full forum, to talk about a subject that is important in our lives. Now, I could have talked about many a subject. I could have spoken about how I founded Gays for Trump. I could have loved to talk about the Trump administration and how identity politics played and continues a critical role in crushing the left's and mainstream fake news media's perception of what or who a Republican or right-leaning voter is. But there's an issue much more important than that pertains to all of us. That issue is the ongoing growing censorship of the right-leaning voice on social media. Every day there's a constant issue with the shadow banning and censoring of conservatives, and the common complaint is, what about my right of freedom of speech? So what can we do? And what is the true responsibility of those social media companies? This might come to you as a shock, but I'm sorry. You don't have these rights with a private organization like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and others. I know that's a hard pill to swallow, but that does not mean we don't have other ways to protect ourselves. After all, we do have certain unwritten rights of proper customer service, to be treated fairly by private organizations, and ultimately the power of the purse. It is important that we all receive a fair shake and understand this. It works both ways, for both liberals and conservatives, even though it seems conservatives could build a bigger case of discrimination. But before we can figure out how to combat this, we must understand just what the First Amendment grants us as U.S. citizens. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution provides that the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. In general, the government may not prohibit its citizens from engaging in speech. However, that does not mean that speech may not be subjected to regulation. For example, the court has decided that the First Amendment provides no protection for obscenity or speech that constitutes what's widely known as, quote, fighting words. And some experts would also add treason, if committed verbally, to that list. Y'all do remember Madonna's blow up the White House comment, right? With that being said, the argument of the First Amendment right is not the way we make changes, but we must understand that private organizations do have the right to remove us from their network if we are breaking such examples I just spoke of. And honestly, we have no recourse, and I, for one, have no pity for those who've blatantly broken the actual terms of service of a network. But that lies the problem. Mostly those removed that broken no such policies. For example, my own official Twitter account for my campaign bid for NC House District 58 at Boykin for House was suspended indefinitely from Twitter. And to this day, I was not informed for just what policy was broken, unless pictures of where restaurants I went to breaks policy. One would think that there should be a law in place for those running for political office falling victim to such censorship on social media. After all, who needs Russian collusion when you have Twitter directly interfering with a political campaign? Of course, this is where identity politics comes to play. This is not just an ordinary candidate race, but this North Carolina congressional race involves myself, a higher profile, openly gay, outspoken, fully doxxed, Trump-supporting Republican who is being harassed daily on social media. One would think that the policies set by the social media companies would protect someone like me. But instead of being protected from others breaking these policies, the powers that be in social media have decided to turn a blind eye to such constant death threats and harassment, but instead have chosen to suppress me, the victim, instead. As much as one would think this would be a hot topic on Fox News by now, I've heard crickets about this situation, and I've learned that unfortunately, as it stands, those on the right have proven they rarely act on things such as this. Although so many people complain about it, this is a big issue. We talk about 1984, we talk about becoming 1984, but I'm here to say we are living 1984. Left unchecked, social media poses a danger as these private companies, mainly foreign-owned, can influence our lives and control us en masse and hold a potential influence for future elections. Banning and censoring of conservative voices is one such interference. I find it odd, but not surprising, that CNN and other fake news agencies spend as much time focusing on Russian collusion campaign influence of the Trump administration, yet ignoring the fact that social media is allowing for direct foreign influence of campaigns by the open and outright biased censorship of right-leaning campaigns such as Boykin for House. If nothing is done, we have risked the complete shutdown of conservatives. and right-leaning voices on the most important social communication structure in the history of mankind. Just like before the election of Trump, we are now facing a crisis of no return if we don't act now. This is why we must fight back. Now, how do we combat this? I call for a regulation of these monopolies and an Internet Bill of Rights being placed for consumer protection for those who use various networks on the Internet. Gone should be the practice of Internet companies having no valid communication method, especially considering that businesses like Facebook and Twitter are taking in direct income from consumers. It is only fair that those spending money in these systems have a direct line of communication. Ultimately, social networks should have systems in place to inform violators that specific rules were broken and a policy in place to allow offenders to correct their actions. We as consumers have to start pressing this issue in the court of law. Trial bases are the only way we can assure changes to what's going on. We must focus on the importance of communication and how strongly we must rise up to fight censorship. We cannot sit back and allow social media to silence our voices any longer. We must find them accountable. It is time that we all fight for our Internet Bill of Rights. I'd like to thank the Triangle Union Urban Republican Network for putting up a historical event. Thank y'all. God bless.
So we've got 3 more